Hello, everybody. I'm Ian Cook, the host of the Soft Boy Social, the best and only softest social podcast you've ever seen. I'm joined today by the lovely and brilliant, as always, Dustin, my co-host, and joined today.
Hey.
Oh, you're gonna cut me off? All right, what a bad co-host.
Yep.
I'm joined as well today by the lovely and brilliant Stephanie. Stephanie, say hello.
Hi, I'm Stephanie. How's it going?
That's Stephanie. Stephanie, what do you do?
I am a licensed marriage and family therapist and a doctoral candidate in clinical psychology.
So you're much smarter than both me and Dustin at this point. At least
I mean, it's really just a matter of specialization and a fancy paper.
valid. That's fair. But in terms of like psychology and therapy and having an understanding of how all of this stuff links together and works, you're in that field specifically. You are much more knowledgeable than me and Dustin.
Hope so.
Me too.
Not nothing personal, but it's a lot of years of education and reading things and writing things, and fingers crossed, man.
Yeah, I feel that. But we've done one episode of the revamped podcast, basically, where we've refocused in on men's mental health to the best that we can with our knowledge. But we've brought you in here because obviously we have gaps in our knowledge and we have questions. And I have a few of them that I want to start with, if you're good with that.
Sure.
So one of the first ones that I think is really important for just when it comes to talking about men's mental health and helping men in general get help with their mental health, which is a mouthful. What do you think are like some of the biggest hurdles for men getting mental health help?
Yeah, so there's actually a couple things I think that can get in the way, and one of them is basically if men have difficulty with expressing and recognizing their emotional experiences. I think in modern American socialization, a lot of Western socialization in general, men are kind of taught to, that strength means kind of stuffing feelings down and just handling it. And they aren't encouraged as much to be as expressive, and because of that, they don't necessarily even know sometimes what some of what they're going through, like the words to put on it. And there's something about language that is very helpful in just clicking things together and helping us address it. To the fact that, like, within my research, this is actually a small portion of my doctoral project, but there's even something called, and I hate it, it's disgusting, but quote unquote, normative male alexithymia. Alexithymia meaning that inability to really put a word to or conceptualize your emotions. And the fact that it's so common that we consider it normative for men, I think is gross, and I hate it. So I think just recognizing that, there's a different way that you can do things. You don't have to just kind of stuff everything down. There are people who can support you. And in that, we've also kind of created this value of strength being avoidance of social support. You can handle it by yourself and you don't need anybody, and otherwise it's weakness. And because of that, men often delay seeking even like standard medical help. Even with like cancer, sometimes with certain cancer signs, men are more likely to just be like, oh, I don't really want to know, or I'm sure it's fine, or I'll get over it. But recognizing, like, when there is an issue, that it is something that can be addressed and changed, and that it's okay to seek help for it, I think can be some of the largest challenges.
Now that's just right off the bat. I've never considered that before, but I guess that would play like a huge part in it. If you don't know what to call something in the first place, you wouldn't know how to seek help for that something, I guess, which is not something I've considered, I guess. That's a lot of somethings.
So it's a lot of something. It really is. I had a conversation with someone, and of course, all information told to me in sessions are confidential. So, this will be in no way, I promise, identifying or in any way anyone's secrets. But, someone was telling me about an experience that they had, and they said, I felt negatively about it. I wasn't that I was uncomfortable or frustrated. I wasn't disappointed, but there's something that was like still bad and deeper. What are the words for that? And so I started spitballing things, because I was thinking by what they explained that they were frustrated or something similar, but they're like, I wasn't frustrated, not disappointed. They're using very long 3 and 4 syllable words. And I got to, I don't know, mad, angry, sad, hurt. And they went, sad and hurt. That's what it is. I felt sad and hurt. And in that moment, the poignancy of the fact, just like how how unfortunate it was that, you know, they could think of all these complicated words, these complicated emotions, and just to be able to come down and say, I felt sad and hurt when that happened. Like, I feel so sad and hurt myself, like, to know that so many men and so many people in general don't have access to these words, because then, you know, we all seek to be understood. We all seek to connect with other people and be accepted and to belong and to feel like we contribute. And when we can't share how we feel, like, what are you even supposed to do with that?
No, yeah, absolutely. That's like, that is really poignant, actually, to have all these words to be explained. But then when it really comes down to it, it really is as simple as like, I was sad and hurt and I didn't know what to do about it.
It reminds me, I don't know if you watch a lot of comedy, but there's this bit that Joe Coy does about his mom, who is Filipino, and English is not her first language. And she goes over to his house one Christmas and she plays, you know, with her Nintendo Wii, and she like falls in love with it and like this bowling game that she could play. And so later she's asking, and, you know, he's mimicking her voice, but I'm not really into that, so I'm not going to do it in her accent. But she says, you know, what is that game? It's the gaming system. It's manufactured by Nintendo. I think and he's like, Wii? The Wii? You're talking about the Wii? Like, she hit all of these large words like Nintendo and manufactured and all these other things that, you know, are such complex words in our language. And just to find that she was talking about the Wii, I don't know. It's like a weird analogy, but that's kind of how I felt about that moment for sure.
No, absolutely. I can see how it has that place. Anything to add, Dustin? Any questions? Or?
I want to. Well, can you say what that was called again? When you can't express, like, talk about like what that feeling is.
So you're cutting out a little bit, but I'm hearing you ask about the idea of alexithymia.
Yeah, that's it. Alexithymia?
Alexithymia, I think.
Yeah, so that's ELEXITHYMIA. And so if you break that down, you know, IA being something that they usually add on to the ends of like conditions that people have or situations, lex or lexicon, you know, words, and then alexithymia, so like not having words for something. And it's very interesting how commonly language facilitates our ability to, I don't know, to process, to exist, to really have existence within the world. Without language, it's really hard to have things. I personally am half Chinese, and so a lot of Asian culture, traditionally at least, I have seen, not to generalize, but to generalize, you know, because we have to sometimes for the sake of discussion. But, you know, there's this big thing about like mental health issues not being a thing, and you just need to like buck up and like figure it out, and you need to handle it. And Asian cultures often have issues with somatization, which is what it's called when someone's emotional experience just kind of comes out in their body instead. So they might come in and complaining about physical symptoms about something, like, oh, you know, my chest is really tight and I have chest pains and like I feel like I'm having a heart attack, and they tell me nothing's wrong. And then we say, oh, you have anxiety. Like, this is a panic attack. This is because you have so much anxiety and pressure and stress stuff down. I actually asked my mom at one point, because I was talking to her, you know, and I'm in the mental health field, and she's telling me like, oh, well, such and such happened, and I'm like, I can't sleep very well, and I'm not eating very well, and I'm just not interested in anything. And I was like, oh, so you're having depression symptoms? And she goes, oh, is that what depression is? You know, they're very much symptoms that we hear about in like every like Zoloft commercial, right? How we think about depression. But just the fact that she didn't have that connection, and she actually works in medicine herself. And so at one point I asked her, like, what were the words that y'all used to describe like things like what we know as depression? And she said those concepts didn't even exist, much less did we have language for them growing up. Like, if you just felt bad, like, you handled it, or it just like went on for so long until it manifested in your body. So yeah, lots of times if we don't have language for something, we can't have it. And when you have an experience that you're told you can't have, or you have an experience that you don't see any validation for in the surrounding media and environment that you consume, to say, yes, this is a thing, other people go through it, and it is, I mean, not normal, but like not uncommon, and, you know, here's what we do about it. When you don't have those concepts, I mean, that's a very weird disconnect and kind of dissonance to be in, where it's like, I have to hold on to this awful thing that I don't even know how to conceptualize. Like, I don't even know what's going on. I must be defective, but I have to be strong, so how do I handle it?
Yeah, I've never seen this exactly alexithymia, but I've seen maybe that is what it is, but I've seen the kind of opposite end of it, where in my family I've had a lot of my family has this long history with depression and anxiety and mental health issues, just because of various aspects of our lives. But it got to the point that one of my family members had gone through a really bad breakup, and they were like, well, I'm taking my antidepressants, like I'm taking all my medication, but I'm still so sad all the time and I don't understand why. And it's like we had to sit them down and explain, like, no, you're just actually sad. You're just experiencing,
it's normal, yeah.
You're just experiencing like real sadness. That's what this is.
It's fine.
Like it's okay. And that was an odd experience that a lot of people don't think about sometimes, is that the opposite end of the spectrum is that sometimes when you've been sad so long, it's hard to recognize what that sadness is when it goes away.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think there's also this idea, and it is unfortunately, I think, perpetuated by the very well-intentioned, like positive thinking sort of movement, where it's like, oh, positive vibes only, and, just change your thinking and be happy. Okay, well, you also can't be happy 100% of the time. Like, could you imagine being happy 100% of the time, no matter what happened? Like, that would be really weird. I don't know if I would want to know the people that are like legitimately happy every single time, like all the time, because that's just not normal human experience. It's not a healthy human experience. It's a little weird. Like, we don't trust that. Like, what are you hiding? Like, clearly there's something wrong here.
No.
Anxiety and depression, like they play valuable roles in keeping us alive. Anxiety says there could be danger. And chances are, if we grew up with anxiety, we either grew up around frequent danger or we learned from people who did. So we learn how to interact with the world and how to be vigilant and how to be aware. Like, if I am walking out about in the city and there is a tiger all of a sudden in the middle of the street and there's like no cages because we're not in a zoo and it's just like growling and looking around, it's normal for me to feel anxious. Like if I'm crossing a very busy intersection, it's normal and healthy for me to feel anxious because it's going to prompt me to like triple check my surroundings and make sure I'm safe or figure out how to get away from danger. Depression is very helpful in situations where we have felt so many difficult feelings for so long. We have felt distress. We have felt what's another good word for this? Anyway, just some kind of distress or difficulty for such an extended period of time. Our brains realize, oh, we're not getting out of this. Like, there's really no way to fight or flee in this situation. You know what? We might as well just numb out. If we have to be here, at least we don't have to feel the damage. And that can be very helpful for survival too. Otherwise, we go through life feeling every single barb and zing and stab that comes our way in situations that we have to be in. So those are like emotional experiences that are valuable. It's just, only until it stops being helpful. And then we start to talk about how do we handle this. But yeah, absolutely. When someone's going through a breakup, if they feel sad, that's great. That's normal. Like, that's a great time to feel sad if we're going to feel sad. If someone doesn't feel sad, like, that's probably okay too. People are like, oh, I felt really anxious when I walked into this really high pressure situation. Should I get a medication for that? And I'm like, probably not. Like, it sounds like you needed to feel anxious, and then you sat through it and you recognized it, and then you were able to act accordingly. So they can be helpful. We don't want to just stop feeling these things. Sometimes just not feeling anything is depression. Sometimes it's not about being sad. It's about being nothing.
Yeah. So going back to the what the biggest hurdles are for getting mental health, what are we kind of lightly like brushed the surface of this, but what are some ways that like people as individuals or people in like their everyday lives can kind of start to break down like these hurdles, and help other people get over those hurdles and help them just in general like come to terms with the fact that they may need mental health help, or if that's something they should be trying to do?
That's actually a really great question. I think the first step is sometimes just spending time noticing. Whether people want to call it being mindful or aware or meditation, which I think are all at this point, unfortunately, very lofty ideas and concepts that have been embraced by popular culture and kind of obscured. Being mindful isn't just like doing yoga poses on mountains and posting about it on Instagram. It's very much about being where you are when you are and just noticing what you're experiencing deliberately, like on purpose. A lot of people don't do this. We spend our time, running around and just handling a bunch of little forest fires, and we don't really stop to think about how we're feeling. But it can be helpful, just for starters, to say, like, set a timer on your phone. Maybe it's 2 minutes, maybe it's 5 minutes. Just sit and just like take inventory of like, hey, what's going on for me right now? What am I noticing? What am I feeling? I actually have a practice that I do myself that I find really helpful. It's technically a meditation, but it's not just like sit and focus on your breathing, which is impossible for me because have way too busy of a brain. And it's also a little more utility. So what I do is I sit and I just kind of say, okay, I'm going to spend this time to kind of take inventory, and I'll, go through this check where I'll say like, let me check in with my 5 senses. What am I seeing, smelling, tasting, hearing, feeling outside of my body right now? And then I go to, okay, what am I feeling inside of my body? Am I noticing sensations? And when I talk about sensations, I like to think about like texture, pressure, temperature. If I had to put a color to something, sometimes if we can't explain our feeling, we can say, well, it kind of feels kind of like dark and gray and kind of thick and dense in my chest or something. So being able to track those is good. Then I take inventory of like, what's the general label I'd put on some of my thoughts right now? Maybe it's a lot about work. Maybe it's a lot about friends. Maybe it's a lot about, my spouse or something I'm working on, or I'm worrying about traffic or something. And then I take track of my feelings. What are the words I'd put to my feelings? Tired, happy, sad, bored, whatever. And then the last one is to kind of get a mind for how I feel about my relationships in life right now, business relationships, social relationships, close relationships. And then I consider it done. And in doing this, if that is something that someone else wants to do, you will find yourself distracted at some point. You will find your mind flitting to something different. And that's a really great practice when that happens, because it will, to like just take a breath and then go back to picking deliberately what you're going to think about. That can help people a lot in terms of getting in touch with where they feel right now. And then if they want to write down how they feel, if they want to share that with someone, that can be really helpful. There's something to be said about human connection that is magic. I mean, I tell a lot of people when they come in, therapy is the magic. Like, you're not going to just tell me all your problems and I'm going to be like, okay, cool, let me wave my magic wand. Like, you're good now. I wish. That'd be really cool.
No, absolutely.
But within that human connection and that concentrated time where we sit together and you are able to talk about your experiences and have someone receive that empathetically and be able to kind of help support you and scaffold you in your own exploration of that. Like, there is a weird magic in that, to where, sometimes it'll be a few sessions in and someone is like, wow, we accomplished all of these goals. Like, I accomplished all these goals and you helped me with that, Stephanie. How did we do that? And I'm just like, I have no idea. Like, I can't write a step-by-step guide as to how that happened, but I can say that human connection really makes such a big difference in terms of how we see the world, how we see ourselves, and how we experience each other. And there's neuroscience to back that up too. Just the way our neurons fire when we are in those situations where someone is there for us and is listening and is supportive, even if we don't always have the right words. It does wonders. It's cool.
So just one last thing I want to touch on briefly while I have you here and stuff. Me and Dustin very lightly touched on it during our last episode. But there's this kind of idea that I see floating around that therapy is like a one-stop shop, like one therapist fits all. And people don't seem to understand or recognize the fact that, like, therapists, like anyone else, is a human being, and that sometimes you simply just don't mesh with one. And so there is kind of a process of having to go out and find the right therapist that fits you. And how would you recommend someone, like, go out and kind of find a therapist that fits for them, and what would be this thing to look for?
Absolutely. So that's a really great question, because you're absolutely right. It's not a one fit matches all, one person matches all, and they shouldn't be. And I feel like oftentimes those clinicians who feel like they have to be one size fits all might be newer clinicians, or they might just feel a lot of pressure to really, get everything going in their practice. But ultimately, you're going to have to just click with the person that you're with. And if you don't feel like you click, that's fine. I would say that Psychology Today is a really fantastic site for being able to put in, what you're looking for. And not just that, but you get a chance to kind of read people's profiles, see how they describe themselves, look at their website, see if what they write really speaks to you. And that is, right now, from the therapist side, something that a lot of therapists are working on in their own marketing, is being able to really just be themselves and express how they are within the copy that you would read on the internet. That way people get a good feel for, what this person's going to be like. Also, oftentimes we'll offer complimentary 15, 20-minute consultation call, and you can just kind of see if you're comfortable with our energy. It's usually over the phone or video. Also, there, if people are in Houston, there is a really cool website matching kind of service called Mental Health Match, and it's it's this really fantastic like combination of like a very in-depth psychological what I'm looking for and what I'm presenting kind of search with like all the fun and charm of like a BuzzFeed quiz, right? So you go in and it's like, check all the things that are you. Yeah, check what kind of things you want to do in therapy. And they're not going to use fancy terms like, do you want to do DBT or CBT or EMDR? No one knows what those mean. We understand. But it'll say, you know, like, oh, I want to practice learning about how my body responds to stress, or I want to work on, you know, how I respond in relationships, or, you know, I would like working like with dance and movement or with art or something like that. And so you go through and you take this really cool kind of fun quiz that's, you know, really friendly and intuitive. And then it spits out, you even put like how much you can pay and what your insurance is. And it'll spit out a list of clinicians whose profiles seem well aligned with what you're looking for. And they also encourage clinicians to put videos of themselves on their profiles so you can watch, you know, how they talk or how they're doing in front of the camera. Unfortunately, ultimately, yes, all of these things can be not ideal in actually expressing what that person is like. So there might be times where you feel like this is a good match and you go in and it just doesn't feel right. Or, you know, you see an otherwise perfect clinician for you, but you can't tell that because their copy or their wording is very like professional and official. Ultimately, it's kind of one of those trial and error things. You go in, you talk to them, you know, you get a feel for them. I always try to tell my clients, you know, if ultimately this isn't a good match and we don't click, that's absolutely fine. I'm connected to a lot of other professionals in the field. I would love to help you find someone that you click with. We are encouraged within the field to provide at least 3 referrals, usually, you know, if something doesn't quite click. So it is a little bit of a trial and error, and that can be disheartening, I understand, especially when it's something so personal. And sometimes the energy it takes for someone to reach out is a lot in the first place. But I really do think it's worth it finding someone that really works well with you. And like, I don't know, man, like some therapists will share memes, you know, some of them will be a little more aloof if that's what you want. Some of them are more, you know, interaction-y. Yeah, that's the word. Or a lot more personable. Like I like being a lot more personable, and, you know, I'll send a meme or two if they come up. And some people don't like that, and some people want it to be very different, but it's definitely an experience for you that you can tailor to yourself. This is a service that someone is providing to you that you have hired them for ultimately. Don't be afraid to, you know, really ask for what you need and what you want. And, you know, and sometimes, hey, asking for what you need and what you want is the difficulty, right? Like that's why we go into therapy, and that can be an uncomfortable situation. Honestly, if you have to ghost a therapist and just cancel and never talk to them again, hey, do what you got to do. But hopefully, you know, one day you can find somebody who you would feel comfortable talking through any little weird snafus or things that you would prefer to have in session.
Yeah, absolutely. So that is because Dustin is busy tonight, and I believe Stephanie has some things she has to go do in like 20 minutes and stuff. We're gonna make it a short episode and call it here pretty soon. But let's just real quick do kind of a brief synopsis of what we talked about. We talked about Alexithymia. Am I saying?
Alexithymia. Yeah. Yep. Close enough.
Yeah. Some good resources or sources for you if you're struggling with mental health and you're looking for them. One was the Mental Health Watch, right?
Sorry? Mental Health Match.
Mental Health Match. One of them was the Mental Health Match. So, you know, if you're ever struggling with mental health, like this is my outcry for you, basically, that there is options for you out there and that there is help for you out there if you just basically go out there, look for them, and find them, basically.
Sure. And something that I'm actually in the Twitch chat right now, I'm going to paste in for the viewers or for the people who are watching now. And also I can tell them how to find it later if they want to, if they are listening to this later, is an emotion wheel. So message leave by moderator, please refrain from posting links. Yeah. Cool. So Google image search, very smart. Google image search for emotion wheel. It's a really great tool that can help you, like in the core, it has some basic emotions like sad or happy or angry or scared. But on the edges, they have more specific words that fall under those categories. So if alexithymia is a thing for you, if you do have difficulty putting words to your emotions, if you just feel frustrated or bad and you can't find a word for it, an emotion wheel is a really great way to just kind of look at what the options are. You know, you can take bad and say, well, I feel bad. Well, it's kind of more I'm not really tired, but I'm really more bored. Okay, I'm kind of apathetic. You know, it helps you narrow down the words, and sometimes just finding the right word can be so helpful in the next step of figuring out what happens next.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for coming on, Stephanie. Really, it means a lot to me. I 100% wholeheartedly hope you come on again.
Yeah.
Everything you said has been like super insightful, super helpful, and just from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for coming on.
Absolutely, and thanks for the invite. I really appreciate knowing that there are people who recognize the need to be soft and for softness and the strength in softness. I believe in it.
God bless. Anything you'd like to add?
I also want to thank you. I apologize for being so quiet, but this entire time I've just been processing what you've been saying, and it's
Sure.
this is awesome.
Yeah, he has been taking notes in our DMs about things to talk about next week, stuff like that. He's good at that. I'm not. He also edits it. So again, public thank you to Dustin for editing the podcast. Thank you all for watching, especially you and Sings Maeve, #1 fan. We'll see you all hopefully next Friday.